Hybrid versus diesel. Which is actually better for high-mileage drivers? If you do real miles, this isn't a fanboy debate. It's your wallet, your time, and how often you're stuck on the side of the road. And depending on who you talk to, you'll hear two totally different religions. Old school crowd, get a diesel, built for the highway, torque for days. These things run forever. New school, eco crowd, get a hybrid, way better in traffic. Diesels are dead, you'll be banned from cities. If you're racking up 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 plus miles or kilometers a year, you can't afford to get this wrong. Over 5 or 10 years, you're talking thousands in fuel, repairs, and headaches. So let's strip the emotion out and look at how these two actually work in the real world. Hybrids are city and mixed driving assassins. Diesels are supposed to be highway freight trains, but that description is based on the old world. In 2026, with modern emission systems and complexity, the story is a lot messier. A full hybrid, think Toyota or Lexus style, newer Hondas, some Fords and Hyundais, is designed to kill it in stop and go. Every time you brake, it recovers energy instead of wasting it as heat. It shuts the engine off when you're stopped. The electric motor does the low-speed crawling and gentle takeoffs. The engine only wakes up when it's efficient to do so, and when it does, the hybrid system tries to keep it in its happy RPM range. If your high mileage looks like traffic, lights, roundabouts, creeping through town, parking garages, suburbs, that's the exact environment hybrids were built for. A diesel is the opposite philosophy. A good one wants to sit at a steady state, warm, under load, rolling. It makes a lot of torque at low revs. On paper, it can be more efficient than a gas engine at constant speed. That's why the old guys will always tell you diesel for big miles. So if your life is basically 2 or 3 long highway stretches a day, barely touching a brake, no city center silliness, a diesel can absolutely shine. But here's where it gets interesting. Both techs have gotten more complicated because of emissions rules, and that complexity ages very differently. Let's start with hybrids. If we're talking about the good ones, Toyota and Lexus first, then some modern Hondas and a few others, the hybrid complexity is actually pretty mature now. Toyota has more than 2 decades of full hybrid experience in the real world. There are Prius taxis with 300,000 to 500,000 kilometers on original hybrid hardware, Camry hybrids doing 200,000 miles in rideshare duty, RX 450Hs still quietly hauling families around after 10-15 years. Those systems use high-voltage batteries, inverters, electric motors, and a weird-looking gearbox, but they're managed conservatively. The battery is never truly full or empty. It lives in a middle band where the chemistry is happiest. The hybrid transmission is mostly just a planetary gear set and a couple of motors turning in oil, with no traditional clutches. Cooling is taken very seriously, and because the electric motor does so much low-speed work, the engine spends its life under less stress than a pure gas car in the same job. Do batteries age? Of course, but in the strongest systems, it's usually 10 to 15 years before you see real degradation, not 80,000 miles. Replacement costs have come down, and there's an aftermarket. Inverters fail sometimes, but nowhere near the disaster rate people used to predict. Now look at a modern diesel. Forget the old mechanical diesels that ran on anything and puffed black smoke. Those are mostly gone from passenger cars in developed markets. A modern diesel has all of this going on. A high-pressure common rail fuel system running at stupidly high pressures, 1 or 2 turbochargers, exhaust gas recirculation to cut NOx, a diesel particulate filter to trap soot, often a separate SCR system injecting AdBlue or DEF into a catalyst to clean up emissions, a load of sensors watching temperature, pressure, oxygen, and NOx. It works beautifully when everything is new, hot, and happy, but as mileage climbs, every piece of that puzzle can cause pain. So if you're constantly doing proper highway runs, getting the exhaust and DPF really hot, giving it a good clear out, you can keep these systems healthy. That's why diesel engines in long-haul trucks and some fleet cars still do serious kilometers. But if your high mileage includes a lot of urban slog, cold starts, and never quite hot enough runs, the DPF is always half clogged, the EGR is always a bit gummed up, the turbo sees lots of heat cycles, injectors get tired from constant fine metering, sensors slowly drift. When something goes, it's not cheap. One DPF issue, one turbo, one set of injectors, one high-pressure pump can wipe out years of fuel savings. So you can't just say, I drive a lot, so diesel is cheaper. You need to factor in both fuel and the cost of the emissions junk that hangs off the engine. Let's put some rough numbers on it. Say you do 20,000 miles a year. Fuel is about $4 a gallon. A good hybrid averages 45 miles per gallon. A solid diesel averaging, say, 38 miles per gallon in your use case. The hybrid uses about 444 gallons a year. Call it $1,776. The diesel burns around 526 gallons, about $2,104. That's roughly a $330 per year difference in this simple example. Sometimes the gap is bigger, sometimes smaller, depending on the exact cars and prices where you live. So fuel alone doesn't decide it. It's fuel plus maintenance plus repairs. On the hybrid side, especially with a Toyota-style full hybrid, you often see very long brake life thanks to regeneration. No DPF, no AdBlue, no 25,000 PSI injectors, regular oil and filter changes like a gas car, maybe a coolant loop or two to respect. The big what if is the battery and inverter. But again, in the proven systems, they tend to go the distance surprisingly often. On the diesel side, you might go longer between oil changes, but you must use the right oil. You have to keep an eye on that DPF, and you have to be honest about your pattern. Are you actually getting it hot enough regularly? And you need to mentally budget for 1 or 2 big-ticket failure events over the life of the car. Now layer on where you live. In Europe and the UK, diesels used to be the default recommendation for high-mileage drivers. Then cities started rolling out low-emission zones, diesel surcharges, parking penalties, and in some cases outright bans for older diesel cars. Diesel fuel is sometimes cheaper, but policy is clearly marching against passenger diesels.
Hybrids, on the other hand, typically skate right past diesel restrictions. They shine in exactly the sort of mixed urban plus ring road plus highway patterns that a lot of European drivers actually do now. If you pile on miles and regularly touch or pass through big cities, a hybrid is often the safer long-term bet politically and mechanically. In North America, it's a different story. Diesel passenger cars never really took off the same way outside of a few VW years. Diesel pickups and big SUVs are where most of the diesel action is. If you're towing a big trailer or fifth wheel, pulling heavy loads, working a truck hard, a diesel still makes a ton of sense. That torque and that fuel economy under load are hard to argue with. But if you're just doing long commutes, highway trips, sales rep miles, and you're not hauling heavy stuff, a hybrid sedan or crossover or even a very efficient gas car can absolutely beat a modern diesel on total cost and stress. In other parts of the world, the Middle East, Africa, parts of Asia, Latin America, it depends. In some places, fuel is cheap and diesel is everywhere. In others, hybrid support is everywhere and Prius taxis rule the streets. In some markets, you can still buy simpler diesels without all the complex emissions gadgets. In others, you're stuck with Euro-style hardware and the same DPF headaches. So we have to stop saying high mileage equals diesel like it's a universal law. It isn't anymore. The more accurate question is, what kind of high mileage do you do? Imagine 2 drivers. Both do 25,000 miles a year. Driver A spends 95% of that on the highway, 70 to 80 miles per hour, long stints, little traffic, rarely going into city centers. For them, a diesel still has a strong case. The exhaust is hot and clean, the DPF gets regular regeneration, the engine runs where it's happiest. Driver B spends half their miles in town, 30% on suburban A roads, 20% on motorway. They hit a lot of red lights, they sit in jams, they do cold starts, school runs, shopping runs, mixed with some long trips. For that driver, the diesel emission system will be fighting the usage pattern. A good hybrid, on the other hand, will absolutely thrive. Another angle people forget is long-term policy. In a lot of European cities, older diesels are already being restricted. Some Asian metro areas are looking at similar ideas. Hybrids, especially full hybrids, not mild hybrids, are usually in the safe category for now. If you plan to keep a car 10 years, that matters. Now let's talk longevity, because people love to say diesel for 500,000 miles. Old, simple mechanical diesels, absolutely. There are Toyota, Mercedes, Isuzu, and truck diesels that have done insane mileage with relatively basic care. But those engines weren't dragging DPFs, SCR systems, and fragile sensors along for the ride. A lot of that hardware simply wasn't there. Modern diesels can also hit big numbers, but the path is narrower. The engine block might be good for 400,000 miles. The stuff bolted to it, the turbo, EGR, DPF, injectors, may not make it there without attention. On the hybrid side, we now have real examples at 200,000, 250,000, 300,000 miles. Prius taxis, Camry and Accord hybrids and rideshare fleets, Lexus RXs doing retirement duty into the hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The engines, if maintained, are usually fine. The hybrid transmissions are usually fine. Batteries sometimes get replaced along the way, but often later than people think. So if your question is which drivetrain has a better probability of doing 200,000 to 250,000 miles with fewer nasty surprises in 2026, the honest answer for most normal mixed pattern high milers is a good full hybrid, not a modern diesel passenger car. That doesn't mean diesels are dead, it means they're now a more specialized tool. So how do you decide? If your life is mainly mixed city and highway, you don't tow, you care about predictable total cost, and you want something that will likely survive a long time with fewer weird rules, a full hybrid is the smarter bet right now, especially if you stick to the proven systems from Toyota and Lexus and carefully chosen Honda, Ford, Hyundai, and Kia hybrids. If your life is genuinely long-haul highway, you tow, you haul, your exhaust is always hot, and your speeds are steady, and you live somewhere that still supports diesels and doesn't hate them, a diesel still makes sense for you. But you need to be realistic about maintenance and the possibility of a big repair at some point. If you're somewhere in the middle, a lot of highways, some city, no towing, and you're nervous about diesel complexity, a very efficient gas car or a hybrid is often the lower stress choice. The main point is this: your mileage number alone doesn't decide it anymore. It's your pattern, your region, your tolerance for complexity, and your access to good mechanics. If you've been looking at this like team hybrid versus team diesel, you're already thinking about it the wrong way. These are just tools. You pick the one that actually matches your job, not the one your uncle or the internet yells the loudest about. If you want to keep digging into this, which hybrids are actually bulletproof, which diesels to avoid, how to calculate real total cost for your specific situation, that's what I'm here for. I'm Gearhead. Every drivetrain has a story, and together we're going to decode which one actually makes sense for your next 200,000 miles.